Hi, everybody. Welcome to what are we? The worldview. That's right, the worldview. For the next 30 minutes, we're going to be talking about the world in ways that you may not have been. Maybe you haven't been briefed on this, right? It hasn't been described to you in these fashions. And today we're going to focus on the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. I think this is very important. Um, during the previous shows, I've been focusing on France and in a not so nice way, which it's not that I don't care what you think, and I certainly do care what you think. It's that these are my opinions. So if anybody has an issue with those opinions, absolutely let me know. I mean, that is, everybody's opinion is theirs, and I respect that. Now, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization was formed in 1949, and we're going to go into the different countries and into funding and into languages and all these different things that went on when NATO was being formed. And I think it's very, very important to understand that the United States takes, to me, my opinion, but I do have some numbers to back that up with, is that and in fact NATO's own report that shows that the US pulls more than their weight from the standpoint of military budgeting, of providing equipment and during exercises and all those things. And I can tell you from personal experience, absolutely, the United States puts more than their effort into any type of NATO exercise. I know that, again, from personal experience, from dealing with NATO in a joint effort that was done during the Balkan crisis. I mean, and I was basically in charge of the NATO cell. So I can tell you that there are definitely countries that are very much aligned with us from the standpoint of allies. And there are countries that would rather kind of use the United States, both the funding and the information, to their better interests. And and those are the partners that we really don't want to have. And it's interesting how we kind of, to use any other term, placate them to make sure that that's part of the deal with the United States. And as a result of that, I think we basically have enabled the countries, France being one of them, to be able to take advantage of the United States. And I'm getting a little bit tired of it. I wrote a book on it, and I don't know how the book is going to be received. Probably not too well by people that like the French, but and sometimes independence is a good thing, but also partnership is what NATO is all about. So let's move into the actual content here. NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, formed in 1949 along with the United Nations. So the membership in 49 consisted basically of 12 major members: Belgium, Canada, Denmark, France, Iceland, Italy, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Norway, Portugal, UK, and the US. So you notice that France is in there. It's one of the main ones: Italy, Luxembourg. And we'll go through. In fact, what I should do is actually point out some of these countries, because maybe people don't know. So there's Belgium here, Netherlands, Luxembourg. You'll notice, if you notice here, which is interesting, Germany is not one of those. You see, Germany. Why? Because they were still trying to figure out what was going on from the standpoint of, I mean, they had just lost a war, so they were trying to rebuild Germany. So Netherlands, France, Switzerland is not part of that, and there's a reason for that. I mean, that's the way. I mean, that's what basically Switzerland was neutral, and they're neutral. Denmark, and Norway, you see those. United Kingdom. Now, interestingly enough, also countries that we normally think of when we think of NATO, and that is Iceland. There we go. Iceland was a part of NATO in 1949. So I mean, I think that's interesting, an interesting aspect on this whole thing. I put this in here just to measure any type of mileage or anything else we want to have in here. So I mean, this is, notice these are all Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, all these areas in here were basically Ukraine, all these areas in here were part of the Soviet Union. They were part of what they call the Warsaw Pact, the reason for NATO being so important. Italy, part of NATO, Greece, part of NATO, but, later on. And I think that's pretty important to understand that is that, this is, Greece is not part of this. Neither is Turkey. Those were later countries that came in there. This is how to get the hold of the NATO, and this is the link here. Official languages: English and French. I just want to point that out, and that's why I kind of capitalize this. Article 14 of the treaty basically said there are going to be two languages that are going to be accepted: English and French. Just blows my mind, because, and the next sentence: France withdrew from NATO in 1966. Now, what was going on in 1966? Well, um, we were in Vietnam at that point in time, 1966. Also, interestingly enough, and it's interesting that France withdrew from NATO. We had bases in France. They said, "Psst, get lost." So all the bases, all NATO country bases were gone. France basically had their own country, and they withdrew completely in 1966. Again, we were in Vietnam. We were helping the French in Vietnam, because that was their colony. But the Viet Minh at that point in time were, and Vietnamese and the Viet Cong were trying to put communism into play, and we had a problem with that, so we were trying to stop that. And the French basically were trying to regain their colonies, is what they were trying to do. So they withdrew. Also, France had tested nuclear weapons at that point in time, so they became a nuclear power. So they figured, hey, and de Gaulle, in quotes, this is a quote: regain on her whole territory the full exercise of her sovereignty. This is, that's a quote from de Gaulle. Gaullist, you can actually look it up. Gaullist is basically trying to, they're trying to maintain their sovereignty. You see how France did this? For World War One, France, it's all about sovereignty. And then after Germany was beaten in World War One, France basically wanted to recoup billions of dollars from Germany. Germany was already beaten. I mean, they were in basically a very, very bad financial situation, and uh, France wanted to punish them still. So it was. I mean, it was a very interesting European history aspect. Okay, which countries are all in? So which countries are totally committed to NATO, right? Um, so the full NATO membership is listed here, and you can go to this and take a look at the full NATO countries, right? The ones that have MIL as a possible choice are those that provide military assistance. Now, France, Finland, and Hungary do not have those boxes, MIL, which possibly means that they regard the MIL as being covered by what they call the MOD box, or Ministry of Defense. And we can actually go to those. I can actually go to that. Go to that area here. Where is it? It is here. So that site, and you can see that you have a lot of different people with MIL next to it. If you go to this MIL, it'll actually take you to the military site for Albania, for Belgium, for Bulgaria. These are all the countries that belong. You'll notice Finland, brand spanking new. They don't have a military aspect, but they do have MOD. So I think, and the reason I say that is because I thought, well, don't they provide military? Now I can see France not providing military because they do, they kind of play that little game. But in 2014, they came back into the military fold. Um, they were kind of out of it. They were kind of this administrative portion of NATO. They didn't provide any military stuff, which was interesting because we provided support to them while they were in the Balkans, and they decided that they were going to come back into the military in 2014. So Germany's part of that, Greece, Hungary, but you can see here Iceland, right? No military and no MOD, which it basically from this I can assume that Iceland does not put any military troops into the NATO bucket, which is interesting. Latvia, Lithuania, Luxembourg, one of the members, Montenegro, and this is I want to show you where Montenegro is. I think that's important to show you that area, because I think so. This area in here is kind of interesting. It's kind of it's kind of this how to conglomeration of many countries. You have North Macedonia, which used to be Macedonia, but now it's North Macedonia, Kosovo, and Serbia. And here's Montenegro right here. You see, it's right in between Bosnia and Herzegovina, Serbia, and Kosovo. And Serbia and Kosovo right now are having issues, but you can see that there's Montenegro right in between that Serbia, Kosovo, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Albania area. So it's good that they're all part of this NATO umbrella. I think that's pretty important. So Norway, Poland, you can see, Portugal. A lot of these are delegates there, but it just seems strange Portugal doesn't have a delegates. But anyways, um, Slovakia, and Czech Republic, they split. At one point in time, they were Czechoslovakia. Now it's Czech Republic and Slovakia. Turkey's part of that. United Kingdom, see, they don't have an MIL, but I know for a fact that they provide military aspects. So I think that MOD is what uh, substitutes for that mill and situation, of course, the United States. So that's basically what's going on there, and what that site goes for. Finland just became part of the alliance, and that's part of the deal. So why did France withdraw from NATO in 1966? I hate to keep focusing on France, but I want to make sure that people understand that, I'm sorry, but the U.S., I guess, because of diplomatic aspects, has to kind of treat France as this, oh, they're our ally, and that's part of the deal, and that's probably good. But I'll tell you something. I don't know if I would ostracize France, but I'll tell you something. They play these little games like going over to China and doing all the kind of other things. I do not like the way that they play the diplomatic game. It's totally and completely self-serving. And people can sit there and say, well, the U.S. does the same thing. Well, I'll tell you, the United States has a set of rules. And basically, the Truman Doctrine after World War II was our set of rules going into NATO. And that's the set of rules that the Marshall Plan went under. That's a set of rules, the Truman Doctrine, all these different things that we had decided as a country that we were going to base our national policy on, our international policy on. And so that's what it does. So why did they withdraw in 1966? In essence, France did not like the US and the UK dictating military use of NATO. And when it came down to what they call a nuclear fleet, because they wanted to have a form of North Atlantic nuclear fleet, and that would have been the US, UK, and France, because France had nuclear capability at that point in time. France wanted their own fleet, and so they withdrew from NATO totally. You don't want to play our game, we're going to take our ball and go home. I mean, France does this, folks. They're all in as long as they're being supported, but the minute they're not being supported, boom, they're out I mean, they're gone. They switch that hat around, but they're out. So, I mean, you got to be careful. De Gaulle always, and this is under De Gaulle now, De Gaulle always wanted France to be central power in continental Europe. I mean, he wanted that. I mean, it's documented in thishistory.com. Look it up. The New York Times wrote, interestingly enough, at that point in time in 1966, the New York Times wrote that the U.S. should get out of NATO. Does that sound familiar? Does that sound familiar at all? 1966, the New York Times wanted that to happen, because they said, look, yeah, let Europe handle their own problems. The US has issues of their own. We need to handle that internally. Isn't that interesting how the US is, we are breaking our own backs here in the United States internally. And there's France that's sitting back going, we're not going to worry about that, even though they have internal struggles. And a lot of people sit back and they go, Chris, your tech is a data aspect thing here. This is data. This is data. I go out and I research this stuff. I'm gathering data. This is not something I just pull out of a hat. This is something I try to research in a relatively methodical manner to be able to make that work. A lot of people, and I tell it again and again and again, data is not just a bunch of tables. Yes, it can be that. Data is also information. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. They sit back and they go, oh, I'm going to take this data and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that with it. Well, that's really nice. But the bottom line is the whole reason for data is information gathering and information sharing. And that's what it's all about. I never quite understood that people treat data differently if they don't see it in a table with a bunch of numbers or a bunch of categories. It's data is data. And not to bust on any particular area, but everyone talks to me about Python. Everyone talks to me about SAS. And everyone talks to me about SPSS. And everyone talks to me about all these tools. I'll tell you what the tool is, folks. The tool is right here in your head. And basically, you need to have that brain moving in that arena of what is the best data that shows me what I need to have to be able to meet my requirements. That is what data analytics is all about. So that's what this is about. So, why did France rejoin NATO militarily, right? So, although still a political part of NATO, even after 1966, they didn't literally rejoin it until 2009. So, even though the US was providing France with support during the Balkan crisis, speaking from personal experience. So, France wanted to say in the committees, the military committees, where military decisions were being made, and they were providing troops to be able to basically, support NATO, but basically they were supporting their own agenda. And a lot of people sit back and they go, "Oh, no, no, they were providing troops yeah, they did that during Korea." When we were over there fighting in Korea, the French did provide troops to Korea. And one reference specifically stated the reason that the French military fought very bravely in Korea. Don't ever get me wrong about that. This has nothing to do with French military aspects. They are really good fighters when they don't have a political agenda. But basically, what happened was they were fighting in Korea because the French wanted to be able to say, "Look, we fought for you in Korea under the UN Charter. We want to have the same support when we need your help in Vietnam." And they knew that they were going to have problems in French Indochina. They knew it. So they planned this thing knowing that they would have the US coming to their aid whenever they needed it in Vietnam to maintain their colonies. Korea was invaded. Korea was invaded by communist forces in the north. Vietnam and all that, it was French colonial aspects that were being uh, threatened, and they did the same thing in Algeria too. So I mean, it's very interesting. It's just the French. I'm sorry, but I know I'm getting out the political aspect here, but there's so many pieces of data out there, so many facts, so many references. When you start to look at them, you suddenly realize, uh, you know, this is shaky. This is shaky with the French folks. France wanted to say so. Even so, it is interesting that they do not have a link to their military site, but they do have one to the Ministry of Defense, which could explain the omission. And I wanted to make sure that that was clarified. That I'm not saying, well, they don't have a military link, therefore they're not providing military. I don't think that's true. I think they do provide military support, again, when it's a support to NATO and it's in their best interest. Um, so why did France want to be the focus of Europe? Why they want to do that? France, since the end of World War II, has always wanted to be central power in Europe. They have made themselves a nuclear power, coincidentally, in the mid 1960s when they withdrew from NATO. They've also made themselves separate from many European decisions, including support for Ukraine, which they have touted heavily, but it's all about France support to Ukraine, France giving tanks to Ukraine, France doing whatever with Ukraine. Um, they have an internal struggle, which is the focus on which focuses on financial ills, retirement for a start. They want to be the chief negotiator for peace in the region, even if it means appeasement. And this is something they did in World War II. They tried that. They tried that attack in World War II, and what happened? They lost their country. Basically, is what happened. Um, and the British ended up at Dunkirk with other European troops trying to escape back to England, to regroup and then go back in and try to fight the war again. So I mean, it's a situation where you just have to take a look at this stuff and say, okay, what exactly is going on? And France has always felt that they are in continental Europe. The UK is not in continental Europe. Yes, they're part of Europe, but they're on an island. And they're separate from the continent. And therefore, France feels that they are, in fact, the leader of Europe, because they are in the European continent, have all the wrappings of being in the of continental Europe, which is true. They are, but of the two countries, France and Germany, I think Germany is more the industrial giant and more the industrial aspect than France is. My opinion, but opinion that has some basis in fact. Should the U.S. trust France? This is a big thing. I'm going to release a book here in the next 6 months. Shows everything from the Revolutionary War, U.S. Revolutionary War, all the way through to current aspects of situations where the French, it's fresh involvement in U.S. history, right? Along with some as with what some may perceive. I'm not saying everybody's going to perceive it when they read the book as possible concerns with France's transparency when dealing with certain areas where they think it's multilateral, but actually it's unilateral aspects here. The book is a mixture of opinion and factual history referenced throughout the text. But again, opinions are there, and so don't think that my opinion counts for everything. Your opinion, of course, you can research yourself, and you can certainly see where I got the information, and it's different perceptions, right? The book is to reveal aspects of the Franco-American relationship that may not be visible to those that are now focused on Europe and France specifically. So the decision of trust for France is based with the reader, not me as the author. I have my own biases, and I will admit that right off the bat. And those biases go into that book, and so you have to forgive me for that. But that's the book was made for a reason with certain hypotheses, and that's what it is. So in that area, when we talk about this and we talk about who we are and what we are, I think that's pretty important to be able to understand that. So this right here is Europe, or is NATO. But I want to see. So remember, we talked English and French, right? So we have a standardization office, NATO standardization office. So what I did was I decided that, English. So English, there's a NATO standardization office, and basically what happens is it's done by what they call the committees for standardization of different terms that are used within NATO, so that NATO, specifically military, can have the same terms, which makes a lot of sense if you come right down to it. So you notice that this is English, and of course this is French. So I thought that was interesting. So this is all the different areas, and this NATO.int is really, really, really good site. You can learn a lot of things about NATO, a lot of different aspects about NATO. So let's go to the French. The French, there it is. Wow, interesting. It's all French. It's all French. It talks about French things, blah blah blah. It's French language. But what do we do? So what else do we have? So we have Russian. Let's see what Russian is. Ooh, information about this topic is available in English and French. Ukrainian. Let's see what I have here. Information about this topic is available in English and French. So why even have a Russian and Ukrainian, choice? I just don't quite understand that, but I guess that's the way it goes there. So let's talk about this for a second. This is a report that's done by NATO called Defense Expenditure of NATO Countries. And this is only until 2022. I get it. It's a year old, but still, let's talk about this. So they give a couple of really great graphs in here. The first graph shows NATO, Europe, and Canada defense expenditures, and it shows 2012. All of a sudden, it's way down here. Then all of a sudden, around 2015, it kicks off. Why is that? Because in 2014, they came out with saying you got to give at least 2% of your defense budget basically to NATO. And so all of a sudden, it's like, oh, here we go. So this is what's going on there. Now let's take a look at defense expenditures, and see if there we go. I can make this a little bit bigger. There we go. So this is defense expenditure, right? 2022. This is estimate, but basically, take a look at some of these here. So we have Great Britain here, Germany. These green lines mean this is the NATO guideline. So 20% of 20% of equipment expenditure, right? And 2% of GDP. So there's your green line right here. So this is greater than 2%, less than 2%. Let's take a look at some of these. USA. Wow. Yes, much greater than 2%, about 3.5%, and much greater than 20%, about almost 25, above the median, which is 25, almost 26%. Let's take a look at France. Where's France? Where's France? Oh, here's France. So from a equipment aspect, yep, they're up there. They're above. In fact, they're almost above the U.S. from that standpoint. But look where they are from the standpoint of GDP. They're down around what 1.9. They're not even hitting this. They're above the median, which is sad, 1.65. But look at where they're at here. I mean, Come on, look at Luxembourg. They're in the 50% range for that, but they're way down here in the for equipment, but they're way down here, way below the median for NATO guidelines here. Great Britain, Estonia, Poland is Poland is right about there. So I mean, there's a lot of different expenditures in what they do, and here's all the expenditures here. Here's the NATO guidelines, 2%. Look at all those above 2%. So France, nope, nope, not there. Slovak Republic is at 2%. Croatia is slightly above that. And look where the United States is, 3.47. You know, lower than they were in 2014, but still above the rest, except for Greece. Greece is the only one that's really up there, 3.76, in a smaller country, and they're providing a lot of stuff to NATO. And look where some of these other ones are: Spain, less than half; Italy, Hungary, Norway. I mean, even Germany, 1.44. So I mean, those are that. Now let's take a look at this. This is the adjusted cost share um, for all the different countries. And look. I want you to take a look at two of them. Germany at 16.3, and the other one is United States. And look at France, 10. So I mean, 10%. So this is the cost share. That's the cost share that they want to have for each of the countries. 10% there. Netherlands, 3. Even Spain is 6%. But France is up there. You know, I don't know if they actually do that, but basically that's, I thought that's interesting. The United States and Germany are the biggest cost shares, and France is down here. So again, it makes you wonder about, it does make you wonder about the different aspects of different countries and how they, how they react, what they do, when it comes to NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So of course it does include Canada. And Canada is, interesting enough, is about 6.87% cost share. So they are one of the top 5, top 6, along with Spain and even Turkey's for almost 5%. So there's a lot of things in there that we can take a look at. So that about does it for me today. I just wanted to go over NATO aspects. I want to go over countries. I want to go over all these different areas. And I think it's important to understand a little bit about NATO and give you some sites where you can go see what's going on with NATO. And the reason that I mentioned France a ton of times is because, why is it that the two languages we have are English and French? I never, ever understood that. And that's because that was part of the deal for France to come into NATO, is that this is what we were going to do. And interestingly enough, part of the reason France came in was to make sure that they were part of the founding countries of NATO, as as well as they want to be in the UN. So all these areas come into play with that, and I think that's important to understand. I mean, they were part of Security Council with the UN. They are major players in overall the international policies that we have. So I think that's very, very important to understand. So on that note, this is Chris Greco signing off for the Worldview, and always try to take a perspective that, yes, this is opinion, and I get it, where people are not going to like my opinion on these things, and I get that. But the sites are there. Take a look at them. You may come to a different perspective, and if you do, that's fine. I want to make sure the data is out there so that people can take a look at it and understand where it comes from, to be able to take a look and come to your own worldview. Take care.